Hello. Hi, everyone. Just have a little pillow here behind my back. Happy Wednesday. Going live. As I said, we have my friend Kalapa here. As I said last Wednesday, I'm going to try to go live every Wednesday around this time. You can probably expect me 12, 12:30, 1 o'clock some days. I just had a coaching session with my coach, Grace, and I felt like the perfect time to share with you after being on this call with her. And the first thing I want to share is that every time I am on a call with Grace, I get very, very grounded in my body. I get very settled. My nervous system gets very settled. My experience of being one of her clients, of coaching with her, is one of seeing how we're led astray habitually and also innocently, how we are led in all these different directions by the busyness, the storms in our minds. So I came onto the call. Let me just share what that looked like. I came onto the call after spending a couple of hours on the computer. I taught this morning. I taught the movement medicine class at 8 a.m. And a habit that I have is as soon as I finish the class, I feel really good. I have energy because I've just moved with everybody. There's always, this little burst of energy. And so I always feel like I want to use it. So I sit down and I get on my computer. There's nothing wrong with that, but my experience of that this morning was I looked up and 2 hours had gone by and it was time for my coaching call with Grace. So I basically kind of frittered away 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. on the computer without really doing much. That's really the point I want to share. It wasn't a whole lot going on. However, it was when spending that 2 hours and then hopping on the call with her, the first thing that she got me to do was settle down internally. Took me through some breathing. This is what I would do with you. This is what I do with my clients. But I didn't even recognize how unsettled I was, how much I was sort of in this kind of racing feeling, in this racing mind. So I share that because we had a beautiful session and I got very clear. One thing came very, very clear to me at the end of it. And that was just how that feeling of being settled internally is really everything. I want to share too that I was in New York City yesterday. I was visiting a couple of my friends. I took the train down. And that experience for me of being in New York City at this point in my life is one of I feel very harried when I'm there. Those of you that live in a big city or that live in New York City certainly can probably relate to that, right? The energy of the city is such that the pulse of the city is such that there's just so much going on and there's so much noise. Literally so much noise, right? And for me, that is, I tend to I'm a bit like a sponge, so I tend to sort of internalize my external environment. Maybe many of you relate to that. And so that translates to a lot of noise in my own head, a lot of busyness, a lot of racing. And I say that because that's probably what led me to, this morning, just kind of being on the computer, kind of mindless. 2 hours just went by, like I said, and I looked up and was like, oh, well, the sun is out, the sky is clear, but I wasn't even aware of those things being on the computer. Hi, Diana. Nice to see you. So I titled this live, The One Thing That You Really Need, all that's required for you to have a better experience, for you to have an experience where you can see something different for yourself, where you can have a shift in perspective. And maybe it doesn't have to be a groundbreaking shift. It can be just planting a little seed. Hello, beautiful Diana. Yeah, nice to see you. Thanks for watching. I'm talking about the one thing that really the one thing that's the base under all of this, under the Unshakable Wellbeing message, underneath any kind of teaching I do, any kind of programs that I run, the one really core message for me is this knowing, this understanding that when you settle down internally, that the elevator, you've heard me talk about the elevator of consciousness, right? The elevator of consciousness will naturally rise. And it just might rise a couple of floors. It might rise all the way to the top where you can see this like crystal clear, perfect view of, many buildings, many mountains, many cities, whatever. We're just working with metaphor here, so work with me. But my experience today that's really why it sounds really simple for me to come on here and say, just settle down. Just settle down, people. Settle down, ladies. Okay, great, Amy, but I have this hamster wheel in my head and I have all these things to do. I have, 75 things to do before I leave for my, my conference next month, or I have to get my, my husband packed and help him and clean the house before he leaves on his work trip, whatever it happens to be, right? There's no reason that you can't do those things in a state of internal grace, in a state of calm, right? So my experience today, going back, my experience with grace was coming in, having this racing mind. I had a little bit of coffee, right? And I also had been on the computer for 2 hours. So having this just sort of sped up experience in my mind. And we all know the difference, right? Between the speediness of our mind, the sped up, like racing thoughts. I wish there were more words to use, because for me, it's just an interesting thing to have to verbalize, to have to put in language. But the sped up experience, think about that for a moment, versus when you are very present in your body, when you can tune into your breath. I'm going to do that now so I don't get ahead of myself as I'm talking to you. Like, just deep breaths. And sitting with Grace today was a reminder that when I'm with her, as I said to you in the beginning of this call, when I'm with her, I get very present on these calls. In fact, I've been in coaching sessions with her where I've laid down on the couch and really rested, like almost fallen asleep, and she kind of gives me that permission to do that. So, and the same thing when I'm in session with women. Generally, we do a little bit of movement in session. This is what my one-on-ones look like. We do the somatic movement, we do some yoga, we breathe, and then we move into coaching, into life coaching, because then you're settled and you're grounded in your body. So that's what she was doing with me today. I just want to share that I need that too, obviously. And then I want to go back to this message that the one thing that's really the only thing, like we're talking about this core base message, or this core piece of information. The only thing that's really required of you is to begin to notice when you are sped up, when you are in this kind of racing experience, or an experience of a speedy mind that thinks it has to bing, 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 and do all of like 17 things. That tends to come with a flavor, for me anyway, tends to come with a flavor of like tension and bearing down on something that I have to do, like bearing down with like excess effort. This is also what I teach in movement classes. I try to help students have the experience of doing, of efforting with a lot less effort. Like minimize your effort, because often we don't even realize it. We're like coming at things and bearing down on them. I'm using my body now to make a point, and it comes with this flavor of like, maybe hardness or tension or just stress. Yeah, it comes with a flavor of stress. And over time, that's exhausting. Over time, that wears you down, right? If you're doing that unconsciously, not really realizing you're doing it innocently. So I'm not making any of this wrong, right? It's all innocent. They're just patterns. They're just habits that we get into. And I noticed my habit this morning was of like, I was really in this racing mind. And I came onto the call, and I'm going to share, I'll go a little bit, maybe 10 more minutes longer if you're wanting to stay with me. And hi, Amy. Nice to see you here. I just saw that Amy is watching. What I ended up talking about, which I didn't expect to talk about in my coaching session, was my relationship. And what I ended up seeing is that this exact piece of information that I'm sharing with you, that all that's really required of you in any moment is to get a little more settled down internally, to notice when you're speeding up, get a little bit more settled, to allow that elevator of your consciousness to rise so that you can see more clearly, so that you can see what's really happening. In mindfulness circles, or in mindfulness terms, like when I was teaching mindfulness to youth, we would call that the pause. Because we would talk to kids about that pause, or that space between stimulus or stimuli, when something's happening to them or someone's coming at them, that pause, or that space between that stimuli and that response or reaction. And we would try to help them see, are you responding to something or are you reacting? Because we were trying to stem violence, frankly. I was working in high schools in New York City. We were trying to stem this and help them just become more conscious and more aware of their reactivity. So this is kind of the same thing. When you begin to settle down, and you all know this, right? You have different ways of doing this, like walking in the woods is, I think, a favorite of a lot of people. Being among trees, just mindfully eating and drinking, and getting out of this space of being really revved up. Revved up is another way to say it, right? So when we settle down internally, when we allow that elevator to rise, it can help us see something different that we may not have been aware of, something in ourselves that's relating to how we're reacting or responding to the world. So I want to share this. It's pretty personal, but I want to share it because it was pretty big for me to see. I came into the call not thinking I would talk about my relationship. If you're just tuning in, I'm talking about my own coaching session that I had with my coach, Grace Kelly, today. We ended up talking about my relationship, and I shared with her, I had an experience this weekend. I had a moment of like wanting to react really strongly to something that my partner said to me. In all innocence, he wasn't saying it to put me down. He wasn't saying it to make me feel bad, but the way I internalized it that way, because I was in this kind of revved up feeling in my body and my mind. And it's just an old habit for me when he says particular things. It's a habit for me to like internalize them and think that's what he's saying. But I caught myself this time. He was sharing with me, or he was asking me a question about, I don't know if I want to go into all the details, but he was asking me a question about he was watching me perform something. I was dancing. I was in a dancing class, and he watched me perform like the solo at the end of the class. And I feel really, really free when I'm doing this dance class. Like, it's the most free, the most expansive I feel. And so he was enjoying himself. He came and saw the last part of the dance class because it's outside. And then we were having dinner later, and he was asking me basically like, were you taking it easy there? Were you like feeling lazy? And I was hearing him say, in my mind, because I was kind of revved up, I was hearing him say like, you were just phoning it in. I was having this experience of what he was trying to say. He was actually asking me if I was tired. That's all he was asking me. Like, he enjoyed the class. He thought I danced beautifully, but I was hearing him say like, you were just phoning it in. And I was getting really, hearing that or having that experience, I was getting really defensive. Yeah. So I caught myself, and kind of even heard that I was about to jump down his throat. I really was about to jump down his throat. Like with a excuse me for cursing, but like, fuck you. I was in my joy. Like, how could you not see that? And the takeaway for me in that is that this whole coaching experience that I have of like just understanding that our wisdom will rise, that the light will shine, the clarity will come when we're settled down internally. that worked in that moment. I settled down enough, or the serum wasn't enough for me to see like, oh, I'm about to jump down his throat, and this is nothing for me to get defensive about. He's innocently asking me a question, and I am innocently really revved up and in this like maybe even hyper vigilant state, right? You can see it, like my shoulders were up around my ears. So it behooves all of us, because we live in a world that is so freaking fast, right? So some would say, spiraling out of control. We live in a noisy, busy world that is not very settled. What's up, Sarah? Hey, lovely. So it behooves us to just start checking in and getting more settled down internally. Settling down internally is all that's required. That was the mantra that came through in my coaching session with her today. So I wrote it down, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about on the live. It's really all that's required. Like, if you strip everything away, you can do all the talking and the coaching and the dance classes and the yoga and the meditation. This is why I'm always saying this, and I'm gonna never shut up about it. Because it's really what shifted me into deeper, more lasting experiences of well-being, a deeper understanding of where well-being actually comes from. It comes from those things. You can feel your well-being. You can get more clarity. You can get quiet when you take a yoga class, when you do a yoga nidra, when you do a meditation. It gives you that experience, right? It opens the doors. It opens the windows, the clouds kind of part. But why does it never stay? Like, that was always my question as a yogi. Why do I go to these classes? Why am I learning to teach yoga? And then, the following day, I'm just as moody as ever. I'm just as cranky and shitty and jumping down my partner's throat as ever. It's because we misunderstand. We don't truly understand where our well-being comes from. Our well-being's always there. Behoove. I love that you just wrote hoove, Sarah. Yeah, it behooves us. Our well-being comes from that experience of the elevator rising. And the elevator really gets stuck when we're in the revved up, sped up place, right? And the simplest, what I love about this coaching, what I love about when I'm coaching women and helping them see it, my favorite thing is just to watch people's bodies come down from all that heightened, bearing down on, we bear down on things with our thinking too. We get so enamored, so compelled by the intellect and what the intellect thinks it can teach us, problem solving, figuring, judging, analyzing. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But to look for well-being, our true well-being inside of that, that's not the place you want to look. That's all I want to say. So if you heard enough of this and you have any questions, or you want to share anything about your own, share your own story about internally settling down and seeing something different. That's all I'm really saying here. When you get calmer. But for me, the words, settling down internally, that just worked a lot better for me today. And I settled down. I was in this session with Grace, and I saw that my relationship is not the exception to this rule. My relationship is not the place where my well-being, basically what she got me to see was that my well-being is not dependent on my partner, and it's not dependent on me getting him to see me, praise me, help me feel better. My well-being is dependent on me settling down internally. And then I have a better experience with Scott in the moment. I'm more present. I can understand and not react to him saying something that I cannot take it wrong, basically. If he says something, I can, there's enough space. There's the pause that I talked about, that I used to teach kids. There's the pause, I'm just slowed down right now. I'm taking in what you're saying. I don't have to react right away. So that kind of presence, that kind of depth of self, I want to say, depth of like being in the moment for whatever is arising without, you know, getting revved up and being, because when you're revved up and when you're in that sped up place, when I'm revved up, I know this to be true, that can just spiral into like a million different stories, a million different directions, like where I could have went, going back to the story I just told you about Scott, where I could have went with that would have been like, you know, he always does this to me. He doesn't see me. He doesn't see how expansive I feel and how much joy I felt. And he's putting me down and I'm, you know, this isn't good. And now we're going to have to go do this. You know, now we're going to have a fight when we get home. It's like, you can see where the mind, you can see where Bob, you know, Bob, the drunk guy gets really, really loud and really, really noisy. And none of that was true. You know, in that moment with him, it was just like, he was just simply asking me a question. And thankfully, I was able to settle down internally enough to see that he was asking me an innocent question and to know that my well-being, I was still in my well-being, and that my well-being is always there. I just said a lot. I just talked a lot, and I just said a lot of words. So if you have any questions, I'm really curious to know what your thoughts are on this, about just settling down internally, right? It's really simple. Like I could talk and talk and talk and talk and talk about it, and that would be my intellect. I'm trying to figure out like how to say the right words to share it and impart it. When actually what we should probably do is just take a moment and get into that experience of actually settling down internally. So let's do that. Put a hand on your heart. Take 3 deep breaths. Breathe in and out. Great. And then you can just kind of feel what that did for you, if you were able to slow down a little bit. I know that part of this is really making a choice over and over to notice when I'm in a speeding, my experience is getting speedy and revved up. And I want to live in that experience less and less, or I don't want to live in that experience so often anymore. You know, sometimes it's just natural. It's natural and it's habitual. Like I went into New York City yesterday, as I mentioned at the beginning of this talk. And New York City is a very revved up, noisy, fast-paced place. And so that just kind of, you know, sponge Amy kind of internalized some of that, brought it home with me. Even being on the trains, I tend to like, on the Metro North, I tend to do a lot of work and so I'm in a busy mind there, trying to get things done, being on social media. Yeah, so just noticing for ourselves when we're getting busy and deciding for ourselves that maybe you don't want to live in that busy, speedy, revved up place so often. Okay? And when you are, it's not a problem. That's the other thing I want to say. So no judgments about when you end up living in speed and busyness. All right, I've talked a lot. So wonderful to see you all. Thank you, Diana, for watching. Thank you, Sarah, for watching. Thank you, Amy, for watching. Let me know what you heard. Every Wednesday, noon, live, coming to you live from my living room or maybe somewhere else that I happen to be working. And I will share more on this topic soon as it comes to me. Okay, bye.